They tried to break him with failure. They tested him with silence, rejection, and doubt. They waited for him to quit. But Joe Ranga did not break. Being unbreakable doesn't mean life never hits you. It means no matter how hard life hits, you rise every single time. Joe Ranga's journey is not a story of comfort. It is a story of courage. When the world turned its back, he turned inward. When doors closed, he built his own path. He faced moments where giving up felt easier than standing strong. Yet in those moments, Joe chose discipline over excuses, faith over fear, and purpose over pain. He understood one truth: pressure does not destroy a strong soul, it reveals it. Every scar became a lesson. Every setback became preparation. Every loss sharpened his mindset. Joe Ranga didn't wait for motivation. He created it through action. He didn't ask for approval. He earned respect through consistency. Today, when people call him unbreakable, it is not because he never fell. It's because he never stayed down. His strength was built in silence, his confidence shaped by struggle, and his power forged through relentless perseverance. Joe Ranga stands as proof that when belief is stronger than fear, no obstacle can stop you. No storm can defeat you. No past can define you. This is not just the story of Joe Ranga. This is a reminder to everyone listening. Being unbreakable does not mean living a life without failure, pain, or moments of defeat. It means accepting that falling is part of the journey and choosing, again and again, to rise no matter how hard the fall was. Joe Ranga's strength was not built in moments of victory but in the seconds after defeat, when disappointment weighed heavy, when hope felt distant, and when quitting seemed like the easiest option. Every fall tested his mindset. Each time he was knocked down, the world expected him to stay there, to accept failure as a final verdict. But Joe understood something deeper. Falling is temporary, surrender is permanent. He allowed himself to feel the pain, but he never allowed that pain to define him. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" he asked, "What is this teaching me?" Rising again required more than motivation. It demanded courage, patience, and relentless self-belief. There were moments when progress felt invisible, when effort seemed unrewarded, and when standing up again felt heavier than the fall itself. Yet Joe chose to rise not because it was easy, but because staying down would have meant betraying his own potential. Each comeback strengthened his character. Each recovery built resilience. Over time, falling stopped feeling like failure and started feeling like preparation. Joe learned to trust himself in chaos, to stay calm in setbacks, and to move forward even when confidence was shaken. Rising after every fall became a habit, a mindset, and eventually an identity. Pain is often seen as something to escape, something to fear, or something to hide from. But Joe Ranga learned early that pain, when faced directly, becomes one of the greatest sources of strength a person can ever possess. Instead of running from hardship, he stood still and confronted it, understanding that every difficult moment carried the potential to shape him into something stronger. Each struggle left its mark, not as a wound but as a lesson. The sleepless nights, the emotional battles, the weight of disappointment, and the moments of self-doubt all worked silently in his favor. Pain forced Joe to grow when comfort never could. It sharpened his awareness, strengthened his patience, and built mental toughness that no easy victory could ever provide. There were times when pain tried to weaken his spirit, whispering that the burden was too heavy to carry. But Joe refused to let suffering turn into self-pity. Instead, he transformed pain into discipline. Every challenge became a training ground, conditioning his mind to remain focused under pressure and his heart to stay steady in uncertainty. Over time, pain stopped being an obstacle and started becoming a source of power. It taught Joe resilience, humility, and emotional control. He learned how to stand firm even when circumstances were overwhelming, how to push forward when motivation was gone, and how to remain committed when the journey felt lonely. Pain didn't break him, it refined him, shaping his inner strength and preparing him for greater responsibilities ahead. This understanding became a core part of who Joe Ranga is. Someone who doesn't fear pain but respects it, knowing that within every hardship lies the foundation of true power. Discipline is the quiet force that carried Joe Ranga forward when motivation faded and excuses tried to take control. He understood that waiting to feel ready or inspired was a trap that kept many people stuck in the same place. Instead of relying on temporary emotions, Joe built habits that demanded action regardless of mood, comfort, or circumstances. Excuses appeared often: lack of time, lack of resources, lack of support, and moments of exhaustion that made rest feel more tempting than progress. But Joe recognized excuses for what they truly were: stories the mind creates to avoid discomfort. He chose responsibility over comfort, showing up even on days when effort felt heavy and results seemed distant. Discipline required sacrifice. It meant saying no to distractions, delaying gratification, and committing to routines that offered no immediate reward. Joe trained himself to stay consistent when no one was watching, understanding that success is built in ordinary moments repeated daily. Every disciplined choice strengthened his character and increased his self-respect. Over time, discipline replaced doubt. Each completed task reinforced his belief that he could trust himself to follow through. While excuses weakened others, discipline empowered Joe to move forward steadily, step by step. He didn't chase shortcuts or easy wins. He focused on progress that lasted. By choosing discipline over excuses, Joe Ranga proved that real strength comes from commitment. Not loud promises, not temporary motivation, but the ability to act with purpose every single day, regardless of obstacles or emotions. Faith became Joe Ranga's anchor when uncertainty surrounded him and fear tried to control his decisions. Fear is natural. It appears when outcomes are unclear, when risks are high, and when failure feels close. Joe did not deny fear or pretend it didn't exist. Instead, he refused to let it dictate his actions. He understood that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Faith for Joe was not blind optimism. It was a deep inner trust in his purpose, his preparation, and his ability to endure whatever lay ahead. When results were delayed and progress felt slow, fear whispered doubts about whether the effort was worth it. Faith answered by reminding him that growth often happens before success becomes visible. There were moments when choosing faith meant stepping into the unknown without guarantees. Joe learned to trust the process even when the path was unclear, believing that consistent effort would eventually lead him forward. Fear focused on what could go wrong. Faith focused on what could be built through persistence. By prioritizing faith over fear, Joe strengthened his resilience. He learned to stay calm under pressure, to make decisions with clarity rather than panic, and to continue moving even when confidence was shaken. Each time he chose faith, fear lost its grip, allowing him to act with purpose instead of hesitation. This mindset enabled Joe Ranga to take risks, embrace challenges, and remain steady in uncertainty, transforming fear from a limitation into a test of belief and inner strength. Silence played a powerful role in shaping Joe Ranga's strength. While others sought validation, recognition, or applause, Joe chose to grow away from attention. He understood that real development happens when no one is watching, when effort is quiet, and when progress is measured internally rather than publicly. In silence, Joe faced himself honestly. There were no distractions to hide behind, no praise to rely on, and no voices to tell him he was doing well. This forced him to build inner confidence instead of depending on external approval. The quiet moments revealed weaknesses, but they also provided space to correct them without judgment. Working in silence demanded patience. Results took time, and without public recognition, it would have been easy to lose motivation. But Joe trusted the process, knowing that consistency in silence compounds into visible strength over time. He focused on improvement rather than comparison, understanding that comparison only weakens focus and steals energy. Silence also protected his vision. By keeping his plans private, Joe avoided unnecessary opinions, doubts, and negativity. This allowed him to move forward without being influenced by others' expectations or limitations. Every quiet effort sharpened his discipline and strengthened his resolve. Through silence, Joe Ranga developed resilience, self-awareness, and emotional control. The absence of noise gave him clarity, and the lack of attention built independence. What others couldn't see during those silent periods became the foundation of his strength. Setbacks were never signs for Joe Ranga to stop, they were signals to prepare. Each obstacle, delay, and unexpected failure carried information that success alone could never provide. Instead of viewing setbacks as punishments or proof of inadequacy, Joe treated them as training moments designed to strengthen his mindset and sharpen his approach. Every setback forced him to pause and evaluate. What needed improvement? What was overlooked? What skills still required development? These moments of reflection allowed Joe to correct weaknesses before they became permanent limitations. Setbacks exposed gaps in strategy and discipline, offering valuable lessons that progress alone might have hidden. Emotionally, setbacks tested his patience and resilience. Frustration, disappointment, and self-doubt surfaced, but Joe resisted the urge to react impulsively. He learned to remain composed under pressure, understanding that emotional control is essential for long-term success. Each setback strengthened his ability to endure discomfort without losing focus. Preparation through setbacks also built adaptability. Joe learned to adjust his plans without abandoning his vision. When one path closed, he searched for another, becoming flexible without compromising his principles. This adaptability made him stronger, more aware, and better equipped for future challenges. Through repeated setbacks, Joe Ranga developed endurance and foresight. What once felt like failure slowly revealed itself as preparation, conditioning him for greater responsibilities, higher expectations, and tougher battles ahead. Self-belief became the driving force behind Joe Ranga's ability to keep moving forward when external support was limited or completely absent. He understood that if belief in himself collapsed, no amount of talent, opportunity, or encouragement from others could compensate for it. Long before results appeared, Joe chose to believe in his potential, even when there was no evidence yet to support that belief. There were moments when doubt crept in, when progress was slow, when comparisons with others felt discouraging, and when failure made confidence feel fragile. But Joe refused to let temporary outcomes define his worth or capability. Instead of measuring himself by short-term results, he measured himself by effort, growth, and commitment to his path. Self-belief required constant reinforcement. Joe built it through action, not words. Each small step forward, each disciplined routine, and each challenge faced head-on strengthened his confidence. Even when mistakes happened, he treated them as feedback rather than proof of inability. This mindset allowed him to recover quickly and stay mentally strong. By trusting himself, Joe developed independence. He stopped waiting for validation and stopped seeking permission to move forward. His belief became internal and steady, unaffected by criticism or praise. This inner confidence gave him the courage to take risks, stand alone when necessary, and remain focused under pressure. Self-belief allowed Joe Ranga to operate from strength rather than fear, turning uncertainty into momentum and doubt into determination. Refusing to quit became the defining principle of Joe Ranga's journey. Talent, intelligence, and opportunity can open doors, but perseverance determines who walks through them and who turns back. Joe understood that quitting does not usually happen in dramatic moments. It happens quietly, when exhaustion sets in, when progress feels invisible, and when the mind begins to justify giving up. There were times when continuing felt heavier than stopping. The pressure of expectations, the weight of repeated challenges, and the loneliness of the path tested his endurance. Yet Joe made a conscious decision to keep going, not because success was guaranteed, but because quitting would have meant abandoning his own standards and self-respect. Refusing to quit required mental toughness. Joe learned to push through discomfort without rushing results. He accepted that some seasons are about survival and consistency rather than rapid growth. On difficult days, progress was simply showing up, maintaining effort, and protecting discipline. Each time Joe chose not to quit, his resilience deepened. Endurance became part of his identity, and persistence turned into a habit. Over time, what once felt impossible became manageable, and what felt overwhelming became familiar territory. By refusing to quit, Joe Ranga separated himself from those who stop when challenged. His greatness was shaped not by ease or speed, but by the unwavering decision to continue moving forward, regardless of difficulty or delay. Joe Ranga understood that identity is not declared, it is earned through repeated actions over time. Who you become is shaped less by single moments of intensity and more by what you consistently do when no one is forcing you. Joe did not rely on occasional bursts of effort. He focused on showing up every day, even when enthusiasm was low and results were uncertain. Consistency required commitment to standards, not moods. Joe trained himself to act according to principles rather than emotions. Some days felt powerful, others felt draining, but his actions remained steady. This reliability created trust within himself, the confidence that no matter the circumstances, he would not abandon his responsibilities. Through consistency, small actions accumulated into massive inner change. Daily discipline strengthened his mindset, sharpened his skills, and reinforced his self-image. Over time, effort stopped feeling forced and started feeling natural. What once required willpower became part of who he was. Consistency also protected Joe from shortcuts. He understood that quick wins often collapse under pressure, while steady progress builds durability. By committing to the process day after day, he developed patience and long-term vision. Each consistent choice reinforced his identity as someone dependable, resilient, and focused. Through unwavering consistency, Joe Ranga shaped an identity that could withstand pressure, delay, and uncertainty. An identity built not on words or intentions, but on repeated action and discipline. For Joe Ranga, having a clear vision was the compass that guided every decision, action, and sacrifice. He knew that without a destination, effort can easily scatter, motivation can fade, and energy can be wasted chasing the wrong goals. A strong vision provided purpose, focus, and clarity, allowing him to navigate even the most chaotic and uncertain circumstances with direction and confidence. Joe's vision was not vague or fleeting, it was deeply personal and tied to his values and ambitions. It wasn't about pleasing others or seeking approval, it was about fulfilling a purpose only he could define. This clarity gave him the courage to make difficult choices, avoid distractions, and stay committed even when obstacles seemed insurmountable. Every action Joe took was filtered through this vision. Decisions that aligned with his long-term goals became easier to make, while those that threatened to divert his focus were consciously avoided. The vision served as both motivation and anchor, reminding him why effort mattered and why temporary discomfort was worth enduring. Vision also helped Joe maintain resilience during setbacks. When results didn't appear immediately, the bigger picture reminded him that progress is often invisible in the moment. Challenges became part of the journey rather than reasons to quit. By keeping his eyes on the end goal, he maintained consistency, patience, and determination. Through a powerful vision, Joe Ranga ensured that his journey had meaning, direction, and purpose. It became the invisible force behind every action, the lens through which he measured decisions, and the reason he refused to be derailed by distractions, doubt, or temporary failures. Joe Ranga recognized early on that life is unpredictable, and rigid plans rarely survive the storms of reality. Challenges, setbacks, and unexpected circumstances are inevitable, but what separates the unbreakable from the ordinary is the ability to adapt. Joe did not see change as a threat. He saw it as an opportunity to grow stronger, smarter, and more resourceful. Adaptability required humility. Joe had to accept that he could not control every situation, and that sometimes, the best approach was to adjust his strategy rather than stubbornly cling to a failing plan. This meant learning to pivot quickly, make decisions with incomplete information, and embrace uncertainty without panic. Being adaptable also demanded mental flexibility. Joe trained himself to remain calm under pressure, to detach from ego-driven expectations, and to evaluate every problem objectively. Challenges that might have crushed someone else became lessons and stepping stones for him. Each obstacle presented a chance to refine his skills, rethink his approach, and strengthen his resolve. Adaptability made Joe resilient in ways that brute strength alone could not. He learned that growth often comes from situations you cannot predict, and success often requires embracing the unknown rather than avoiding it. By staying flexible, he turned roadblocks into opportunities, mistakes into insights, and sudden changes into advantages. Through adaptability, Joe Ranga transformed uncertainty from a source of fear into a platform for innovation, problem-solving, and relentless forward movement. It became a key element of his unbreakable character, allowing him to navigate life's twists and turns with confidence and resourcefulness. Joe Ranga understood a truth that many overlook. Natural talent can give someone a head start, but it is hard work that determines how far they go. Talent alone is fragile. It shines briefly but fades without dedication, consistency, and relentless effort. Joe committed himself to outworking everyone, knowing that persistence and sweat would carry him beyond those who relied solely on gifts they were born with. Hard work for Joe was more than effort. It was intentional effort. Every task, practice session, and challenge he faced was approached with focus, planning, and discipline. He didn't settle for average performance or minimal effort. Even when results were slow to show, he continued pushing, understanding that every action compounded over time into unstoppable progress. This work ethic required sacrifice. Joe often went beyond comfort, sacrificing leisure, easy routines, and immediate gratification for long-term gains. Where others quit or slowed when tired or distracted, he maintained momentum. His persistence became a habit, a part of his identity that reinforced his self-belief and resilience. Hard work also taught Joe patience and humility. He learned that success is rarely instant and that the most meaningful achievements are built brick by brick, day by day. Every small victory, every disciplined repetition, reinforced the power of consistent effort. Through relentless hard work, Joe Ranga proved that effort outlasts talent. It became the engine that powered his growth, transformed obstacles into achievements, and allowed him to reach heights far beyond what mere natural ability could achieve. Joe Ranga viewed failure not as a defeat, but as one of the most powerful teachers in life. While many fear failure or avoid it at all costs, Joe embraced it, understanding that each mistake, setback, or loss contained a lesson essential for growth. Failure forced him to examine his choices, identify weaknesses, and discover areas that required improvement. Every failure carried a message. Joe learned to ask the right questions. What went wrong? What could I have done differently? How can I prepare better next time? Instead of dwelling on disappointment, he used failure as a mirror to reflect on his decisions, habits, and mindset. This reflection turned temporary loss into long-term advantage. Failure also built resilience. Experiencing defeat without giving up taught Joe how to endure discomfort, face criticism, and recover stronger than before. He discovered that the most valuable insights often emerge from moments when success feels impossible, and when fear and frustration are at their peak. Moreover, failure expanded Joe's perspective. It helped him understand that setbacks are universal, that no journey is linear, and that even the most successful individuals face moments of defeat. This awareness reduced fear, increased empathy, and strengthened his determination to keep moving forward despite obstacles. Through failure, Joe Ranga developed wisdom, patience, and a deeper understanding of himself. Each mistake became a stepping stone, transforming what others see as loss into a source of preparation, insight, and unstoppable growth. Joe Ranga understood that focus is the multiplier of effort. Talent, hard work, and ambition can only take someone so far, but without focus, even the greatest abilities are diluted. He learned to concentrate his energy on what truly mattered, cutting out distractions, unnecessary noise, and tasks that did not align with his goals. Focus allowed him to channel his time, energy, and resources toward high-impact actions that produced tangible results. Maintaining focus required discipline and intentionality. Joe trained his mind to resist the temptation of short-term pleasures, social comparisons, and fleeting trends that could derail progress. Each day, he prioritized what aligned with his vision and ignored what did not, knowing that clarity of purpose is essential for meaningful achievement. Focus also sharpened his decision-making. When confronted with multiple options, Joe could identify the paths that brought him closer to his objectives, avoiding wasted effort and indecision. By concentrating on fewer things but executing them exceptionally well, he created momentum that compounded over time. Furthermore, focus strengthened his resilience. Challenges and distractions that might derail others became mere noise to Joe because he had anchored his mind on a larger purpose. This mental clarity allowed him to maintain consistency, weather setbacks, and act decisively, even under pressure. Through relentless focus, Joe Ranga amplified the results of every effort. What might have taken years through scattered attempts was achieved faster and more effectively because he concentrated on what mattered most, proving that focused action outweighs scattered energy in the pursuit of greatness. Joe Ranga understood that resilience is not something you are simply born with, it is a conscious choice made every single day. Life presents challenges, setbacks, and unforeseen obstacles, but resilience is the decision to face them head-on rather than succumb to despair. Joe chose to respond to difficulty with strength, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to his goals, even when the situation seemed overwhelming. Resilience required mental toughness and emotional control. Joe experienced moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion, yet he refused to let these feelings dictate his actions. He trained his mind to see challenges as temporary tests rather than permanent barriers. This perspective allowed him to approach problems with clarity, creativity, and determination rather than panic or frustration. Choosing resilience also meant embracing discomfort. Joe understood that growth is rarely comfortable and that the path to success is often lined with pain, sacrifice, and prolonged effort. Instead of avoiding difficulty, he leaned into it, knowing that every trial was an opportunity to strengthen his character and prepare for future challenges. Resilience strengthened over time through repeated practice. Every time Joe refused to give up, every time he continued despite setbacks, his ability to endure grew stronger. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable became manageable because he had conditioned himself to adapt, persist, and maintain focus under pressure. Through the conscious choice of resilience, Joe Ranga became unstoppable. He transformed obstacles into opportunities, setbacks into lessons, and moments of weakness into demonstrations of inner strength. Resilience, for Joe, was not accidental. It was a daily decision that shaped his character, defined his journey, and allowed him to rise stronger after every fall. Joe Ranga understood that patience is not simply waiting. It is an active practice of persistence, discipline, and trust in the process. While many people give up or act impulsively when results are slow to appear, Joe recognized that lasting success is built over time, not overnight. Impatience can lead to hasty decisions, mistakes, and shortcuts, whereas patience allows vision, effort, and timing to align perfectly. Patience required Joe to develop trust. Trust in his preparation, trust in his abilities, and trust that consistent action would eventually produce results. Even when progress seemed invisible, setbacks occurred, or challenges piled up, he maintained focus and continued moving forward. He understood that growth often happens in ways that cannot be measured immediately, and that enduring the process quietly is essential for long-term achievement. Practicing patience also meant managing frustration and controlling impulses. There were moments when Joe wanted instant validation or immediate success, but he trained himself to prioritize persistence over speed. Each delayed result was not a failure. It was an opportunity to refine his skills, strengthen his mindset, and ensure that the eventual outcome would be meaningful and lasting. Through patience, Joe developed endurance, resilience, and a clear sense of timing. He learned that rushing leads to mistakes, while steady, deliberate effort compounds into powerful, irreversible results. Patience became a secret weapon, allowing him to outlast competitors, navigate uncertainty, and consistently take the right actions at the right time. By embracing patience, Joe Ranga mastered the ability to wait strategically, work consistently, and trust the process, proving that those who endure wisely ultimately achieve more than those who act hastily or succumb to frustration. Joe Ranga understood that courage is not an occasional burst of heroism. It is a daily practice, a conscious choice to act despite fear, uncertainty, or risk. True courage does not exist in moments of ease. It is forged in discomfort, in situations where doubt and hesitation whisper loudly, and where the temptation to take the safe path is strongest. For Joe, courage meant showing up every day, even when the outcome was uncertain and the stakes were high. Courage required Joe to confront his fears directly. He faced the fear of failure, rejection, judgment, and the unknown, but he refused to allow these fears to dictate his decisions. Instead of avoiding challenges, he leaned into them, recognizing that growth, opportunity, and achievement are born from action taken in the presence of fear. Daily courage also demanded discipline and self-belief. Joe trained himself to act consistently, even when fear made him question his abilities. He learned that bravery is not the absence of doubt, but the ability to move forward despite it. Each courageous act reinforced his confidence, strengthened his mindset, and expanded the boundaries of what he believed he could achieve. Furthermore, courage allowed Joe to make tough decisions. Whether it was standing alone, pursuing an unconventional path, or taking risks others avoided, he trusted his principles and vision over the fear of criticism or failure. Courage became a habit, an inner muscle strengthened by repeated action and intentional risk-taking. Through the daily practice of courage, Joe Ranga transformed fear into fuel. Every time he acted despite uncertainty, he grew stronger, wiser, and more capable. Courage was not a single moment of heroism but a continuous commitment to face challenges head-on, demonstrating that true bravery is built in the routine of daily choice and consistent action. Joe Ranga understood that mindset is the invisible architect of destiny. It is not circumstances, luck, or external validation that ultimately determines success. It is the lens through which one perceives the world, interprets challenges, and takes action. A strong, positive, and growth-oriented mindset allowed Joe to turn obstacles into opportunities, setbacks into lessons, and uncertainty into a platform for progress. Developing the right mindset required conscious effort. Joe trained himself to focus on solutions rather than problems, to see possibilities instead of limitations, and to replace self-doubt with self-belief. He recognized that a negative or fixed mindset leads to hesitation, fear, and stagnation, while a growth-oriented mindset fuels resilience, adaptability, and unstoppable momentum. Mindset shaped not only Joe's actions but also his emotional response to life. Challenges no longer triggered despair or frustration. Instead, they became opportunities for growth and skill building. He learned to approach difficulties with curiosity, to seek lessons in failure, and to remain confident even when the world seemed uncertain or hostile. Furthermore, mindset amplified the impact of every effort Joe made. Hard work, discipline, and talent could only carry him so far. How he thought about those efforts determined whether they led to progress or burnout. By maintaining a mindset of perseverance, optimism, and strategic focus, he ensured that his actions consistently moved him closer to his goals. Through the conscious cultivation of a resilient, growth-focused mindset, Joe Ranga shaped his destiny rather than being shaped by it. He demonstrated that success begins not with circumstance, opportunity, or skill alone, but with the mental framework through which we interpret and respond to life's challenges. Joe Ranga understood that progress and greatness are never free, they demand sacrifice. Every achievement, every milestone, and every moment of growth required giving up comfort, convenience, and sometimes even short-term happiness in pursuit of a larger vision. Joe accepted that sacrifices are not losses but investments in the person he was becoming and the life he was determined to build. Sacrifice for Joe meant prioritizing long-term goals over immediate gratification. He often had to say no to leisure, entertainment, or social distractions that could slow his momentum. Nights of rest were traded for extra hours of work, skill development, or planning. Moments of comfort were exchanged for challenges that stretched him physically, mentally, and emotionally. Making sacrifices also required clarity of purpose. Joe never sacrificed blindly. Each choice was deliberate and tied to his vision. He weighed the cost of giving up certain things against the value of what he was building, understanding that every moment of discomfort would compound into strength, resilience, and eventual success. Sacrifice demanded patience and discipline. It required staying committed even when the results were not immediate, when the world seemed indifferent, and when the rewards of effort were invisible. Joe learned to trust that the choices he made today, though difficult, were shaping a future that aligned with his goals and values. Through sacrifice, Joe Ranga cultivated focus, resilience, and determination. He proved that real progress is never effortless and that those willing to give more, endure more, and delay gratification are the ones who achieve lasting success and leave a legacy of strength, purpose, and unbreakable character. Joe Ranga understood that legacy is not a matter of words, intentions, or recognition. It is the sum of consistent actions, decisions, and the impact left on others and the world. A legacy is built not by what you say you will do, but by what you actually accomplish, how you inspire, and the standards you uphold in the face of adversity. Joe's life became a blueprint for others because his actions reflected his principles, discipline, and unwavering commitment to excellence. Building a legacy required Joe to think beyond himself. He realized that short-term gains and personal comfort are fleeting, but contributions that endure come from meaningful effort, influence, and example. Every choice, every action, and every moment of perseverance had the potential to ripple outward, touching people, communities, and even generations. Legacy also demanded responsibility. Joe could not afford to act carelessly or inconsistently. He recognized that his habits, mindset, and decisions directly shaped the story he would leave behind. Each day was an opportunity to reinforce his character, build trust, and create a pattern of excellence that would be remembered long after individual moments had passed. Furthermore, Joe understood that legacy is cumulative. Small actions repeated consistently, discipline, courage, honesty, resilience, and generosity, build a far stronger foundation than occasional grand gestures. Through daily commitment, he ensured that every effort contributed to a life defined by impact, influence, and unbreakable principles. Through action, consistency, and integrity, Joe Ranga built a legacy that inspires, motivates, and teaches others the value of dedication, perseverance, and purpose. His life demonstrates that legacy is not inherited or promised. It is earned through deliberate, meaningful, and sustained action that outlasts the fleeting moments of life. And so, the story of Joe Ranga is more than just a tale of one man's strength. It is a roadmap for anyone willing to rise, endure, and fight against the odds. Every fall he faced, every challenge he overcame, and every sacrifice he made reminds us that true power is not measured by what life gives you, but by how you respond when life tests you. Joe Ranga teaches us that being unbreakable is not about avoiding pain or failure. It is about rising every single time, trusting yourself when no one else does, and refusing to quit even when the world says you should. His journey is proof that resilience, discipline, courage, and unwavering self-belief can turn ordinary people into extraordinary forces. So, take a page from Joe's life. Embrace your struggles, trust your journey, and stand tall no matter how hard life hits. Because greatness is not given. It is earned by those who refuse to break, who continue to rise, and who live with purpose every single day.